The sun had barely risen when Lena Hart stepped out of her apartment, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her leash pouch clipped to her belt. The air still clung to the chill of early morning, and the streetlights blinked lazily overhead, as if reluctant to give way to daylight. Her phone buzzed with the day's schedule: 5 dogs, 3 households, and a full route before her 10 a.m. sociology class. Just another Thursday. She adjusted her ball cap and started toward the first house, a modern colonial with perfectly trimmed hedges and a video doorbell that always blinked red when she approached. Mrs. Felton's beagle Buddy, she reminded herself. A nervous little guy who hated squirrels and loved bacon treats. As she walked up the drive, the door opened before she even rang the bell. "Right on time," Mrs. Felton said with a tight smile, already in tennis gear. "He's fed and ready. Keep him out of the mud, please." Lena nodded. "You got it." The leash clipped on. Buddy's tail wagged furiously, his paws already dancing with anticipation. As they moved to the next client's house, an elderly widow with a pair of lazy pugs, Lena allowed herself to fall into the rhythm she loved: the quiet pace, the familiar sidewalks, the smell of dew-soaked grass, and faint chlorine from someone's morning sprinkler run. Walking dogs was never her dream job, but it paid better than waitressing, and the clients mostly kept to themselves. It gave her space to think, to breathe, to imagine a life outside of midterms and rising student loans. By the time she reached her third stop, she was smiling. "Hey, girl," she murmured, kneeling beside a lanky labradoodle named Junie. The dog immediately licked her cheek, tail thumping against the tile entryway. Lena laughed and rubbed behind Junie's ears. "You ready for your big adventure?" It was during the walk with Junie, halfway down Westcott Trail, that she noticed the new listing on the community board, a handwritten flyer pinned under a lost cat poster. It read, "New dog walker available, reliable, discreet, affordable." The name was scribbled at the bottom. Dalton. No number. Just an email. She frowned, feeling something tighten low in her stomach. She didn't like competition, especially not in her own neighborhood. But more than that, she didn't like the word discreet. It rubbed her wrong, like a cold breeze slipping under a doorframe. Junie barked once, tugging her leash toward a side path that edged the forested lots near the edge of the neighborhood. Lena gently pulled her back. "Not today, girl." The woods could wait. She had one more stop, and this dog, an unfamiliar name added last minute to her app, was a rescue with a caution tag. Bear. That's what the request said. Older, big, gentle, but a bit of trauma history. Please be patient. Lena headed toward the final house, unaware that this particular walk would be the last normal one she'd ever take. The house at the edge of Sycamore Lane looked like it belonged in a movie. White siding, black shutters, and a wraparound porch with 2 rocking chairs that hadn't rocked in years. Lena double-checked the address on her app, then glanced up at the door. No welcome mat, no porch plants, not even a doorbell camera. It gave off an odd stillness, like it was holding its breath. She knocked twice. After a pause, the door creaked open, revealing a tall, wiry woman in her late 50s with tired eyes and a cardigan that hung off one shoulder like it had given up trying. Her name tag from the app said, Marla Grant. "You must be Lena," the woman said, stepping aside. "He's in the sunroom. Won't bite, but he spooks easy." Lena nodded, stepping inside slowly. The house smelled faintly of lavender and something older, like cedar and forgotten memories. She followed Marla through a narrow hallway into a glass-walled room filled with golden light. And there he was. Bear. He lay curled on a faded dog bed, massive even in stillness, his fur the color of honey aged in shadow. One ear twitched at her approach, But he didn't lift his head. His eyes opened, deep, soulful, and tired, and locked on her with a guarded awareness. He was a K-9 dropout, Marla explained softly. Too gentle, they said. Got sent to a home with a kid who, well, things didn't go well. Lena crouched slowly, extending the back of her hand for him to sniff. Bear didn't move. Not away, not forward. Just watched. When she reached for the leash clipped to the collar, looped loosely around his neck, he let out a low whine, barely audible and tensed. "It's okay," she murmured, lowering her voice. "I'm not gonna rush you." She sat back on her heels, giving him time. After a minute, Bear shifted. One paw forward, then another. He didn't wag his tail, he didn't lick her hand, but he stood. And that was something. They stepped outside together. The morning sun hit his coat, and he blinked like he hadn't seen real light in a long while. Lena could feel the weight of him through the leash. Not just his size, but the tension in his muscles, the way his eyes flicked constantly, scanning the street for something unseen. He didn't tug, didn't bark, didn't stray. But every so often he'd pause and stare at a bush, or a mailbox, or a passing shadow with too much focus, like he was remembering. 15 minutes into the walk, Lena checked her watch and glanced down at him. "You okay, Bear?" He didn't look at her. Instead, he turned his head toward the woods at the end of the cul-de-sac. His ears perked, his body stiffened. And then, for just a second, he growled. Low, warning. Lena followed his gaze, but saw nothing, just empty trees and dancing light. Still, her heart beat a little faster. The sun had fully risen by the time Lena circled back towards Sycamore Lane, Bear walking steadily at her side. His earlier tension had eased, but only slightly. He moved like a soldier trained to expect landmines, quiet, controlled, but always scanning. They were approaching the final stretch when Lena heard the creak of a porch swing. She turned her head. A man sat across the street, half shrouded in the shadow of a drooping willow tree. He rocked slowly, rhythmically, the chain of the swing groaning with each motion. He wore a faded ball cap and a tan jacket zipped to the throat despite the warming day. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes weren't. They were fixed on Bear. Lena offered a polite wave, the kind you give to suburban strangers. The man didn't wave back. Instead, he leaned forward, squinting. "That's the rescue dog from the Grant house, isn't it?" he called. Lena hesitated. "Yeah, first day walking him." The man stood, stretching long limbs like he hadn't moved in hours. He crossed his porch, stepping down with a deliberate slowness that made her pulse quicken. Something about the way he walked reminded her of an actor hitting marks, too precise, too smooth. "I'm Dalton, live across from Marla. You can tell her the fence along the east side's sagging again. Keeps happening." His tone was neutral, but there was a strange familiarity in it, like he already knew her and was waiting for her to realize how. "Sure," Lena said carefully. "I'll let her know." Dalton's eyes flicked to Bear, who had stopped walking. The retriever's entire body had gone taut. His ears were pinned back, his tail lowered, not tucked, but wary. He didn't growl, but he didn't move forward either. Dalton's gaze lingered on the scar near Bear's neck, just barely visible beneath the golden fur. He clicked his tongue. He was a tough one, wasn't he? Still has the look, like he's waiting for something bad to happen. Lena felt a ripple of unease coil in her stomach. "How do you know that?" she asked, more sharply than intended. Dalton smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Small neighborhood. Word gets around." Bear let out a soft whine. His paw scratched against the sidewalk, and Lena instinctively tightened her grip on the leash. I should get him home, she said, already backing away. Dalton nodded once, watching her the entire time she turned. His voice followed her down the block. Be careful in those woods, miss. Lots of things end up buried out there. Lena didn't look back, but she didn't forget those words either. Lena liked to reward good behavior with off-leash time, only in safe zones, only when the dog earned it. And despite his tension earlier, Bear had been composed during most of the walk. Steady, responsive, alert. So, near the edge of the neighborhood where the trees stretched tall and the trail curved out of sight, she unhooked his leash and let him wander a bit. All right, buddy, she murmured. 5 minutes. Stretch those legs. Bear didn't bolt like most dogs. He didn't sprint or sniff or dive nose first into the underbrush. He moved with a purpose, nose low, shoulders taut. Lena followed from a short distance, watching as he veered off the gravel path and into the fringe of the woods. There wasn't much back there, just a tangled stretch of trees separating two subdivisions and a creek that bubbled when it rained. It hadn't rained in days. She called out, "Bear, stay close!" He didn't respond. Instead, he disappeared behind a thick patch of ferns. Lena quickened her pace, her boots crunching on dry leaves. Bear. A rustle, then silence, then snapping twigs. He emerged moments later, and Lena's heart leapt with relief until she saw what he carried. In his mouth, clamped delicately between his teeth, was a child's sneaker. It was white once, now caked in brown mud. The laces were torn. One side was stained a dull red that had seeped into the fabric. Blood. Old, but unmistakable. Lena froze. Bear trotted up to her, dropped the shoe at her feet, and looked up. Not with playfulness or pride, but something else. Expectancy, like he'd brought her something important, something that needed to be seen. She stared at the shoe, then at the woods, then back at Bear. "No," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she crouched. She didn't want to touch it, but she couldn't leave it either. She slid a poop bag over her hand like a glove, gingerly picking the sneaker up and turning it over. Inside, the lining was shredded, as if something, or someone, had struggled to get it off. She looked down at Bear. He didn't move. His eyes were fixed on her, unblinking, his entire body alert. Lena stood, her breath coming faster now. She fumbled for her phone and took a few photos, then slipped the shoe carefully into another plastic bag and sealed it tight. Bear still didn't wag his tail. He turned, staring back at the trees. And Lena, despite every instinct screaming to walk away, followed his gaze. Back at her apartment, Lena placed the sealed bag with the shoe on her kitchen table, her hands still cold, despite the late morning sun pouring through the window. Bear lay nearby, eyes trained on her every move. He hadn't left her side since they got back. It was like he knew what the shoe meant, even if no one else would believe it. She stared at it for a long time before finally pulling out her phone. "Non-emergency police line," said the voice on the other end. "Hi, my name is Lena Hart. I'm a dog walker, and this morning one of my dogs brought me something from the woods near Westcott Trail. It's a child's sneaker. It looks..." She glanced at it again. "It looks like there might be dried blood on it." The woman on the line hesitated, then asked for her address and a quick rundown of where she'd found it. Lena explained everything. Bear's behavior, the woods, the torn lining. When she finished, there was a pause. "It's probably just an old shoe, Miss Hart. We get calls like this all the time. Could be anything. Mud, paint, rust stains. That trail's near the old campground, right? Kids leave stuff out there all the time." "But it wasn't just sitting out," Lena pressed. He dug it up, and the fabric inside, something shredded it. There's a name written on the tongue. Chloe. Another pause. This time longer. We'll send someone by to collect it for evidence, just in case. But unless there's additional context or a report tied to it, I can't guarantee much will come of it. Lena gritted her teeth. Wouldn't it make sense to check it against missing persons reports? We will, if necessary, the woman said, her tone polite but drifting. But again, this happens more often than you'd think. By the time Lena hung up, a hollow feeling had settled in her chest, like she'd thrown a flare into the sky and no one was looking up. She sat down, rubbing her temples. Across the room, Bear shifted. He let out a quiet huff and rested his chin on his paws, eyes never leaving her. I believe you, she whispered. Outside, traffic buzzed and life moved on. But in Lena's kitchen, the bag on the table sat like a ghost, and Bear, loyal and watchful, stayed curled up beneath the storm only he seemed to sense was coming. The next morning, Bear refused to move from the front door. Lena had clipped on his leash, grabbed her walking gear, and whistled like usual. But instead of trotting to her side, Bear stood rigid by the door, his eyes locked on the knob, tail low and still. When she gave a gentle tug, he let out a soft, stubborn whine and scratched at the doorframe. Come on, buddy. This isn't our route today, she said, trying to coax him with a treat. He sniffed it, ignored it, then pawed at the door again, harder this time, more desperate. It wasn't stubbornness, it was insistence. Urgency. Lena sighed, crouching beside him. You want to go back, don't you? He whined in response, pressing his head gently into her chest. His body trembled just slightly, as if something inside him was wound too tight. She hadn't been able to sleep much the night before. After filing the report, she'd expected a knock, a call, anything. But no one followed up. And the shoe? Still sitting in her fridge, sealed and marked. She'd even Googled Chloe plus missing plus Westcott Trail, but found nothing definitive. A couple of vague Reddit threads. A local Facebook group post about a girl who'd gone missing 2 years ago, but no last name, no photo. Now Bear was acting like he'd left something behind. Their morning walk was slow. Every time they neared a cross street, Bear pulled toward the forest. When she wouldn't let him go, he'd stop completely, tail stiff, body low, eyes pleading. It wasn't just a whim. He needed to return. Lena tried to distract him with other routes, other dogs. Nothing worked. He ignored his water bowl when they got home, sniffed at his kibble and turned away. Even the peanut butter Kong, a favorite from yesterday, went untouched. By late afternoon, Bear stood at the apartment door again. No bark, just stillness. Waiting. Lena sat on the couch, heart thudding. The police hadn't cared. The trail had gone quiet. But Bear hadn't forgotten. He couldn't. She looked down at the leash in her hand, then at the shoe in the fridge. Something was out there, and Bear wasn't going to rest until she saw it too. By the third day of Bear's silent protest, Lena gave in. She didn't tell anyone, didn't text a friend or drop a pin. Some part of her knew this wasn't a normal dog walk anymore. This wasn't about behavior or enrichment. Bear was leading her somewhere, and she wasn't sure what they'd find when they got there. She parked near the same bend in Westcott Trail, the morning sun barely filtering through the canopy. Bear leapt from the car before she'd even unhooked his harness, his nose already to the ground. He didn't bark, didn't hesitate. He moved like he remembered a path the rest of the world had long forgotten. Lena followed closely, her boots crunching over leaves and soft moss. The trail narrowed as they moved deeper, swallowed by trees and damp air. There were no joggers this far out, no hikers, just silence. And Bear's breathing. They veered off the path near a fallen log, and Bear picked up speed, tail stiff, ears locked forward. Then he stopped. Lena nearly stumbled into him. He was sniffing furiously at a patch of disturbed earth beneath a thick tangle of roots. Something shiny caught the light. Bear pawed at it gently. Lena knelt, heart hammering, and brushed away the soil. It was a toy. A child's doll, no more than 6 inches tall. The plastic was cracked, the painted eyes scraped off. One arm was missing, and its dress, once pink, was brown with old grime. She picked it up carefully, the weight of it impossibly heavy in her hand. "Jesus," she whispered. Bear didn't move. He stared at the doll with the same intense focus he'd had when he brought her the sneaker, like he knew what it was, or who it belonged to. A breeze passed through the trees then, subtle and strange, and for a moment Lena could have sworn she heard something. Faint, muffled, a whisper. She turned sharply, scanning the woods, but there was no one. Just trees swaying, leaves rustling, shadows shifting with the wind. "Hello," she called out. Nothing. Bear let out a low, uneasy growl, not at anything she could see, but toward the dark stretch of woods ahead. Lena swallowed and slipped the doll into a plastic bag. Her fingers trembled as she sealed it. She looked down at Bear. "You were right," she murmured. "Something happened here." He turned, tugging her gently back toward the trail, as if to say, "Not yet. But this is only the beginning." The library smelled like old pages and lemon polish, a strange kind of comfort Lena hadn't realized she needed. She hadn't been inside since freshman year, but after what she'd found in the woods, first the sneaker, then the doll, she needed answers that a Google search wouldn't give her. Bear wasn't allowed inside, so she'd left him in the car with the windows cracked and a frozen peanut butter bone. He hadn't protested. He seemed to understand this was part of the mission. The librarian on duty was a thin woman with silver hair and sharp, watchful eyes. Her name tag read, Gail. Lena approached her cautiously, unsure how to phrase what she was looking for. "I was wondering if there's a local archive," she asked. "Old newspaper articles, missing persons cases." Gail's gaze narrowed just slightly. "For a project?" "Kind of." Lena hesitated. "Have you ever heard the name Chloe Mayfield?" The woman's entire posture shifted, not dramatically, just a slight stiffening, a tension in her hands as she closed the book in front of her. She said nothing for a moment, then nodded toward the back corner. "Try the microfiche. Local papers, last few years. You'll want fall of 2021. Lena thanked her and made her way to the machine. It took nearly 20 minutes of scrolling before the headline stopped her cold. "Search continues for missing girl. Chloe Mayfield, age 7, vanishes during family camping trip." There was a photo, washed out and overexposed, but the child's face was clear. Light brown hair, big gap-toothed grin, eyes full of mischief. The kind of face that lived in picture frames, not headlines. According to the article, Chloe had been camping with her father in the woods near Westcott Trail. They were supposed to spend the weekend hiking and roasting marshmallows. She'd wandered from the campsite to collect pine cones. She never came back. Search parties were organized, bloodhounds, drones, volunteers. Her backpack was found near the creek 2 days later. No signs of a struggle, no body, no leads. Eventually, the case went cold. Lena leaned back in her chair, breath shallow. She pulled out her phone and zoomed in on the doll she'd found, snapped in the woods just yesterday. The pink dress was faded and filthy, but the trim, lace with tiny blue beads, matched the one Chloe was wearing in a second photo, buried deeper in the article. The doll was hers. Bear had led her straight to it. Lena's throat tightened as she scrolled further, reading the final line of the story. Authorities believe Chloe may have gotten lost in the dense woods. but her family insists she was taken. Taken. And suddenly the whisper in the woods didn't feel like wind anymore. It felt like a name, half-spoken, waiting to be heard. The air was thick with humidity as Lena returned to the woods with Bear, the late afternoon sun filtering through the leaves like stained glass. She hadn't planned on coming back so soon, but after what she'd read, after seeing Chloe's face and that dress, she couldn't stay away. Not while questions clawed at her insides. Bear moved with even more urgency today. He didn't sniff or explore. He navigated. A silent compass drawn to something only he understood. They passed the spot where they'd found the doll, but Bear didn't stop. Instead, he veered left, weaving between trees until he came to a tall maple with bark peeling along one side. He circled it once, then began pawing at the base, growling low under his breath. Lena hurried over. "What is it, boy?" She dropped to her knees and helped clear the loose earth. Beneath the layer of moss and rot, something jutted out, soft, decaying and cornered with faded plastic. She dug gently, heart pounding, and pulled out what looked like an old spiral notebook, its cover warped from damp and time. The pages inside were stuck together at the edges, the ink smudged and bleeding. But as she peeled it open, she saw them. Words, childish handwriting, crooked and inconsistent. The first page had hearts drawn in red crayon. The name Chloe M. was scribbled at the top. Lena's breath caught. She flipped to the next page. It was dated October 15, 2021. 2 days after Chloe had disappeared. And there were more entries. October 16. He brings food again. I hate the dark. I miss Mommy. October 18. There's a trap door. I heard another kid crying. I think her name is Emma. October 22. He says I can go outside soon, but I don't believe him. Bear doesn't bark. Bear just watches. Lena stared at that line, heart in her throat. Bear. She flipped through more pages, many unreadable, the ink drowned in mold, but every so often, a sentence stood out, legible through the grime. He locks the basement at night. I heard the trees whisper. I think they want to help. Then, the last entry she could make out, November 1. If someone finds this, please don't forget me. Lena closed the notebook slowly, hands trembling. She looked at Bear, who sat beside her, eyes calm but watchful. You knew, she whispered. You remember her. He didn't move, didn't blink, just waited, as if saying, now you know where to look next. The first thing Lena noticed when she got home that evening was how still everything felt. Too still. Bear didn't trot ahead like usual. He lingered at her heel, tail stiff, ears rotating like satellite dishes, scanning for sound. She reached the second-floor landing and paused, her keys halfway to the door. That's when she saw it. A note, taped crudely to the center of her door with blue painter's tape. A single sheet of lined notebook paper, the edges torn like it had been ripped from a school binder. The handwriting was jagged and angry, each letter dug deep into the paper. Stop digging. Dogs die too. Her breath caught. A cold flush rolled down her spine. She didn't move for a full 5 seconds. Just stood there, the message burning in her vision, the echo of her own pulse loud in her ears. Bear let out a low, guttural growl. He moved forward and sniffed the note, then the floor, then the doorknob. His fur rose slightly along his back. Lena tore the paper down, hands shaking. She scanned the hallway. No one. Just a quiet corridor lined with empty doormats and closed blinds. Someone had been watching her, knew where she lived, and this wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. She unlocked the door quickly and ushered Bear inside, bolting it behind them. Her fingers hovered over her phone, unsure of what to do. Call the police again. Tell them someone taped a scary note to her door. After how they shrugged off the shoe. She sat on the couch, staring at the paper. The last line played over and over in her head like a twisted chant. Dogs die too. She looked at Bear. He sat in front of her now, alert, eyes locked on hers. Someone wanted her to back off, to stop asking about Chloe, to stop following Bear into the woods. But it was already too late for that, because Lena had seen the doll, held the notebook, read Chloe's last words, and now she knew the truth. Someone out there still remembered. Someone out there still feared being found. And Bear, he hadn't led her this far to stop now. Lena's key stuck slightly in the lock as she turned it, her backpack slipping from her shoulder as she juggled her iced coffee and phone. She'd only been gone 2 hours, just a quick class and back. Bear usually greeted her the second the door opened, but this time there was no sound, no thump of paws, no clicking nails across the hardwood, no warm snout pushing against her leg. Her stomach dropped. She shoved the door open. Bear. Silence. Then, from the corner of the living room, a low, painful whine. She spun toward the sound and found him, curled in the space between the couch and the bookshelf, his body tense and low to the ground. Blood stained his golden fur along his side, seeping into the floor beneath him. Oh my God, Bear. She dropped everything and rushed to him, heart in her throat. He didn't snap or flinch, just let out another whimper, his eyes wide but unfocused. Lena ran her hands carefully over his body and found the source. A long, shallow gash along his ribs, still oozing but not deep enough to hit muscle. It hadn't come from a fall. It was too clean, too deliberate. Her gaze swept the apartment. The coffee table had been knocked askew. A lamp shattered on the floor. One of the kitchen drawers half open, its contents scattered. Someone had been here. Lena's chest tightened. Her mind raced to the note on the door from the day before. Dogs die too. This wasn't just a scare tactic anymore. They'd gone after Bear. She grabbed her phone, fingers trembling, and dialed the emergency vet. As she gave the details, she cradled Bear's head in her lap, whispering softly to him, her voice breaking. "You're okay. You're okay. I've got you." He licked her hand, weak but trusting, as if to say, "I know." After hanging up, she wrapped him in a towel and held him close until help arrived. As the vet techs lifted him into the back of the mobile unit, Lena turned and looked back at her apartment. The broken lamp, the ransacked drawers, the blood on the floor. This wasn't just about Chloe anymore. Someone out there was watching her. And now, they were willing to hurt the one thing she loved most just to shut her up. But they'd made a mistake. Because Bear wasn't just a dog. He was a witness. And Lena had just run out of fear. Detective Marcus Reyes looked nothing like the badge he wore. Dressed in a plain gray t-shirt and weathered jeans, he stood with one hand resting on the counter of the emergency vet clinic, the other scribbling notes in a leather-bound journal that looked older than Lena. He hadn't blinked when she told him everything. The shoe, the doll, the notebook, the note on her door. And now, Bear. Most people would have written her off. But Reyes just listened, his eyes sharp and calm, like he was waiting for her to connect pieces she hadn't seen yet. When she finally finished, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep and raw fear, he flipped the notebook closed and asked, "Can I see the photo of the shoe?" Lena pulled out her phone, scrolling to the image she'd taken that first morning. He leaned in, studying the blood-stained canvas, the ripped laces, the faintly written name on the tongue. "Chloe Mayfield," he muttered, like he already knew. "You've heard of her. I was still patrol back then, Reyes said. Wasn't my case, but I remember it. Kid went missing on a father-daughter trip. No signs of struggle, no body. Everyone assumed she wandered too far and the woods swallowed her. She didn't wander, Lena said firmly. She was taken. He met her eyes. Yeah, that's what her mom always said too. Reyes tucked his notebook under his arm and looked through the glass window where Bear rested, sedated but stable, a bandage around his side. You said he's a rescue. According to the owner, she mentioned something about him being pulled from a bad situation, maybe from a home with another missing kid. I didn't think much of it until now. Reyes nodded slowly. K9s don't forget sense, not really. If he was around Chloe or wherever she was held, he'd remember. Maybe not in a way we understand, but dogs know. Lena exhaled, finally feeling something close to relief. So what now? Reyes looked around, then leaned in slightly. Officially, I haven't heard any of this, but off the record, I'm going to look into it. Discreetly. No paperwork. No desk cops who'll file this under crazy dog walker drama. You believe me? I believe Bear, he said, then added, and you're smart enough to follow a trail most people would have ignored. That counts. He slid a card into her hand. Keep me posted. If anything else happens, anything, you call, day or night. Lena nodded, pocketing the card. For the first time since Bear brought her that shoe, she didn't feel alone. She had a cop who believed her. Now they just needed proof. The footage was grainy, the angle skewed just enough to make faces hard to see, but it was there. The shadow, the movement, the presence she'd felt in her bones before Bear had ever been hurt. Lena paused the video, heart racing, and leaned closer to her laptop screen. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, her breathing shallow. She hadn't planned on doing this. It felt invasive. Wrong. But after the break-in, after Bear's blood on her floor and that note, she couldn't afford to play by the rules anymore. The night before, she'd remembered something. One of her clients on Sycamore Lane, the Thompsons, had bragged about their new doorbell system. Records everything, motion triggered. Even infrared at night, Mr. Thompson had said, smiling like he'd invented it himself. So Lena had asked to drop off their dog's extra treats that morning and subtly connected her tablet to their Wi-Fi while inside. The security app was simple to crack, especially with the saved login she'd glimpsed written on the fridge. Now, watching the time-stamped footage from 2 nights ago, hours after Bear had been attacked, she saw it. 1:47 a.m. A figure approached her parked car, hooded, tall, moving with eerie slowness, like they knew exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid their full glare. But for 1 second, just one, they stepped too far into the light, and Lena froze the frame. The face was barely visible, but there was something about the posture, the angular jaw, the shape of the mouth. It felt familiar. She skipped forward. 1:49 a.m. The person bent down near her car's driver's side door, hand on the handle. Then something small and metallic reflected briefly before they backed away and disappeared behind the hedges. Lena sat back in her chair, her heart pounding. They hadn't just watched her. They'd tried to get into her car. She rewound, paused again on the clearest shot, and took screenshots from every angle she could salvage. Then she pulled out Detective Reyes's card. He'd said to call, day or night. She hesitated only a moment before dialing. When he answered, his voice gravelly but alert, she didn't waste time. I have footage. Someone was near my car 2 nights ago, right after the break-in. There was a pause then. Text it to me. I'm on my way. Lena hung up, hands still shaking. Whoever was out there wasn't done watching. But now she had eyes too. Detective Reyes arrived just past 9 with two things: a portable audio scanner and a file folder thick enough to make Lena nervous. He didn't say much at first, just gave Bear a gentle scratch behind the ears, carefully avoiding the bandaged side, then sat at her kitchen table and plugged in a small black device that looked like a cross between a radio and an old tape deck. "I went out to the trail after our last call," he said, clicking a flash drive into place. "Placed a recorder where you said Bear found the doll. Left it there overnight." Lena sat across from him, arms folded tightly, trying not to shake. "Did it catch anything?" Reyes didn't answer. Not yet. He adjusted the volume knob, pressed play. At first, there was only static and the soft rustle of wind through leaves. An owl hooted faintly in the distance. Then, something shifted. Voices, faint, layered, not conversational, more like fragments. Echoes of something unfinished. A child humming, a woman sobbing. A breath caught sharply in the dark, then a whisper. Lena sat up straight. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Reyes nodded grimly. He rewound the clip, isolated the segment, and turned the gain up. The whisper returned. Clearer this time. "She saw me." Lena's blood turned to ice. She didn't speak. Couldn't. The voice wasn't a child's. It was low, male, hoarse with panic. It came and went like wind through teeth. But it was there. "She saw me," it repeated again, just before the audio dissolved into static. Reyes leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "That's not an animal. Not wind. Not some echo off the trees. That's a voice. A real one." Lena swallowed hard. They were out there, that night, watching. "More than watching," Reyes said. "Confessing." He clicked off the device and opened the file folder. Inside were a few black and white photocopies, old case notes from Chloe Mayfield's file. One included a psychological profile on the type of suspect most likely to abduct multiple children without immediate detection. Methodical, isolated, hyper-aware of surveillance. "Someone's nervous," Reyes added. "You're not just stirring up memories, Lena. You're pressing on a nerve." She nodded slowly, still hearing the voice in her ears. "She saw me. Chloe? Or someone else?" Either way, the woods were talking now, and Lena was finally starting to understand what they were trying to say. It started with a glimpse in the side mirror. Lena was halfway through her afternoon route, walking a spry little terrier named Max through the quieter end of the neighborhood, when she noticed the white pickup. It turned onto the same street she did, drove slowly, too slowly, then paused at a stop sign that didn't require that much thought. She didn't think much of it at first. Probably a contractor, a lost driver, nothing unusual. But then she saw it again, the next day, and the day after that. Always the same truck. White, no visible plates. The front bumper slightly dented, the driver's window cracked open just enough to see the dark outline of a man behind the wheel. It never parked, never got close enough to confront. But it was always near, a shadow on the fringe of her routes. Never the same exact location, but always there. Watching. Bear noticed it before she did. His posture would change whenever the truck appeared. His ears would perk, his tail stiffen. One time he growled low in his throat, the sound barely audible over the rustle of leaves. That was when Lena knew it wasn't just in her head. That evening she pulled out Reyes's file again, the section about witness reports. There it was, in a copy of Chloe Mayfield's case notes. A statement from her mother. White pickup, parked by the trailhead the day Chloe vanished. Man inside, smoking. I thought he was just a camper. Lena stared at those words for a long time, her heart thudding so loud it drowned out everything else. The same truck, the same driver, still here, still watching. She didn't call the police, not yet. She knew what they'd say. No plate, no approach, no crime. But she texted Reyes. "Lena, he's back. White pickup. No plate. Keeps following me during walks. I think it's the same one from Chloe's file. Reyes, I'm coming. Don't engage. Don't go home. Take Bear and wait at the coffee shop. I'll find you." She shoved her phone into her pocket, clipped Max's leash back on, and turned around. Bear followed, tense and alert. She didn't look back at the truck. She didn't have to. She knew it was still there. And this time, she was done pretending it was just coincidence. The forest was heavier that day, like the air itself had thickened with secrets. The white truck hadn't shown up again, not since Reyes had started shadowing Lena's route in an unmarked sedan. But Bear's behavior made it clear something was still out there, something he could smell beneath the soil and roots and rot. Lena followed him deep into the woods, past the place they'd found the doll, further than she'd ever gone before. The trees grew closer here, bark twisted like clenched fists, and the trail faded into wild undergrowth. Bear stopped suddenly, nose twitching. He began to dig. Not frantic like a dog burying a bone, but precise, intentional. Lena stood back, her pulse quickening with every spray of dirt. The earth was loose, like it had been disturbed before, then covered again. Bear let out a sharp bark and paused, pawing gently at something fabric. Lena dropped to her knees beside him. It was a child's backpack. Faded pink, the kind with mesh pockets and a zipper pull shaped like a star. She brushed the dirt from it slowly, reverently. The front was streaked with old blood, dark, dried, and crusted into the fabric. Her hands trembled as she unzipped it. Inside were a few scattered items, a small hairbrush, stickers curled at the edges, a plastic unicorn keychain, and at the bottom, a photo. Lena's breath caught. It was Chloe, smiling, sort of. But it wasn't the joyful grin from her school portrait. It was tight, uncertain, forced. Her eyes looked off camera, not at the person taking the picture. And behind her, blurred by distance, stood the outline of a man. The photo shook in Lena's hand as she turned it over. A date was scrawled in childish handwriting. October 29th, 2021. Weeks after Chloe was reported missing, Bear whimpered beside her, pressing close, as if to shield her from what they'd just uncovered. Lena didn't cry. She didn't scream. She carefully resealed the backpack in a clean bag she'd brought for Bear's supplies and took photos of the shallow grave. Then she texted Reyes a single word. Found. As Bear sat beside her in the dirt, silent and steady, Lena stared down at the forest floor. They hadn't just found evidence. They had found proof. The call came just after midnight. Lena had been dozing on the couch, Bear curled protectively against her legs, when her phone buzzed with a single word from Reyes. Confirmed. She sat up fast, heart thudding as she hit dial. Reyes answered on the first ring. "It's hers," he said without preamble. The blood on the backpack, the clothing, it matches Chloe Mayfield's DNA profile. No question. Lena swallowed hard, her throat dry. What about the photo? It's being analyzed now, but we're treating it as legitimate. It hasn't been doctored. The timestamp and materials match the period when she disappeared, which means someone took that picture after she was reported missing. Silence settled between them, thick and heavy. Then Reyes added, his voice lower, harder. The moment that blood came back, the status changed. This isn't a missing persons case anymore. It's officially a potential homicide investigation. Lena leaned forward, pressing a shaking hand to her forehead. She had known it, deep down. From the moment Bear brought her that shoe, from the whispers in the woods. But hearing the word homicide made it real in a way that shattered something inside her. "Do they know?" she asked softly. "Chloe's family. I'm going to see them in the morning. They deserve to hear it in person." Lena nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Reyes continued, more carefully now. "We'll need to bring you in for a statement soon. You've been the catalyst for all of this, Lena. You and Bear. Without you, Chloe would still be a cold file in a locked drawer." She looked down at Bear, who lifted his head at the sound of her voice. His eyes were tired, but calm, resolute. "He's the one who found her," Lena said quietly. "He remembered when no one else did." Reyes paused, then said, "He might remember more. So will the person who's been watching you." Lena's stomach turned. "You think they'll come back?" "I think they're scared," he replied, "and scared people make mistakes." She ended the call minutes later, but sleep never came. She sat on the floor with Bear, her back to the couch, and stared out the window into the darkness beyond the glass. They had blood. They had proof. And now, whoever had been hiding behind the trees would finally have to step into the light. The house was quiet, too quiet for a home that had once belonged to a family of 3. Lena stood awkwardly on the porch, shifting from foot to foot as Detective Reyes knocked on the door. She hadn't expected to be here. She thought he'd go alone. But he'd called that morning and simply said, "She asked to meet you." The door creaked open, and a woman stepped into view. Chloe's mother. Her name was Rebecca Mayfield. In the photos from the case files, she'd had a radiant smile and soft, laughing eyes. The woman standing before Lena now looked like a ghost of that person, her features sunken, her eyes tired and rimmed red, hair streaked with gray that hadn't been there 2 years ago. "Miss Hart," Rebecca said softly. "Please come in." Lena followed her into a modest living room that felt preserved in time. Toys still sat on a nearby shelf, untouched but dusted. A tiny pink raincoat hung from a hook near the door. Chloe's, no doubt. Rebecca sat slowly on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap, shaking slightly. "You found her things," she said. "The backpack, the photo." Lena nodded, unable to speak. Her throat was tight with emotion. Rebecca's voice cracked. "They kept telling me she wandered, got lost, that she was probably gone before the first search even started. But I knew she didn't just vanish." She looked up then, locking eyes with Lena. "You have a good heart," she whispered. "And that dog of yours, he remembers her, doesn't he?" "Yes," Lena said, her voice barely audible. "He led me straight to her things. He didn't stop until I listened." Rebecca covered her mouth with one hand as tears welled and spilled down her cheeks. Her body shook with silent sobs. Then she leaned forward, her voice a fragile whisper that broke something deep inside Lena. "I knew she was still out there." Lena moved without thinking. She knelt beside her and wrapped her arms around the grieving mother. Rebecca clung to her like a drowning woman to driftwood, sobbing into her shoulder, years of silence and aching finally given a place to land. "I don't know if she's alive," Rebecca cried, "but knowing someone found her things, that she wasn't forgotten, that's more than I've had in 2 years." Lena held her tighter, eyes burning. "You're not alone," she said. "We're going to find the rest, all of it, whatever's still out there." And she meant it, because Chloe Mayfield deserved more than memories. She deserved justice. The door was wide open when Lena got home, not cracked, not damaged, just open. Her breath caught mid-step. She froze on the threshold, grocery bag dangling from her hand, ice cream already starting to melt through the paper. The soft creak of the door swinging gently in the wind sounded like a scream in the silence. "Bear," she called, stepping inside slowly. "Bear." No response. Her apartment was chaos. The couch cushions slashed, stuffing spilling like guts. Her desk overturned, drawers yanked out and flung across the floor. Books torn, pages scattered. The TV cracked, her lamp shattered. She dropped the groceries, heart hammering against her ribs as she ran into the bedroom. His bed was empty. The leash still hung on the hook by the door. His bowl was untouched, and Bear was gone. Lena's breath came in short, frantic gasps as she stumbled into the living room. That's when she saw it. The message. Written in black spray paint across her wall, bold and jagged, the letters dripping down the paint like blood. "Next time, it's you." Her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. She grabbed her phone with trembling fingers and called Reyes. He answered on the first ring. "They took him," she whispered. "Bear's gone. Someone broke in. My place is destroyed, and they left a message." Reyes cursed under his breath. "I'm on my way. Do not stay there." Lena moved to the hallway, eyes scanning the shadows outside her door, every instinct screaming that someone might still be watching. She locked herself in her neighbor's apartment after pounding on the door, her body shaking as adrenaline took over. Bear was more than a dog. He was a witness. And someone knew he was the thread that could unravel everything. They were trying to cut it. But they'd made a mistake, because taking Bear wasn't a warning anymore. It was war. The wind howled through the pines as Detective Reyes drove fast down the gravel road, tires skidding over loose stones, headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Lena sat beside him, clutching her phone like a lifeline, her jaw tight, her heart pounding so loud it nearly drowned out the engine. "They didn't know," Reyes said, eyes fixed on the road. "They took Bear, but they didn't know he's chipped. The rescue center logged it before he ever got to you." Lena nodded, her voice hoarse. "Where is it pinging from?" Reyes glanced at the tablet mounted to his dash. A small green dot blinked on a map, dead center in a stretch of woods she didn't recognize. "An old campground," he said. "Closed down after a fire years ago. No power, no maintenance, no visitors. Perfect for someone trying to stay off the grid." The car bounced as the road narrowed, the trees pressing closer, branches clawing at the windows. Lena's nails dug into her palms. "He's scared," she said quietly. "I can feel it." Reyes didn't respond, but his hand hovered near his holster. They crested a hill and saw it, a rusted metal gate hanging crooked on broken hinges. Beyond it, a dirt lot littered with leaves and debris. Several moldy wooden cabins stood in the shadows, their roofs sagging, their doors half open like yawning mouths. Reyes killed the headlights and rolled forward in silence. The tracker beeped faster. "Signal's strong. He's here." They stepped out quietly, boots crunching on damp leaves. Lena followed close behind, every muscle in her body tense, her ears straining for any sound. A twig snapped in the distance, then another, then something else. A whimper, faint, but unmistakable. "Bear," Lena breathed. She broke into a run before Reyes could stop her, heart in her throat as she followed the sound. She rounded the corner of a collapsed cabin and found him. Bear, tied to a tree, his fur matted, his sides still bandaged, but filthy. He lifted his head weakly at the sight of her, tail thumping once against the ground. "Oh my God, Bear." She dropped to her knees, untying the thick rope knotted cruelly around his collar. He leaned into her, whimpering softly, his body trembling. Reyes swept the area behind her, gun drawn, scanning the shadows. "Whoever did this might still be close," he warned. But Lena couldn't look away from Bear. He was alive. Hurt, but alive. And in his fur, just behind his ear, stuck to the tangled hair, was something small, a patch of fabric. Lena plucked it free. A girl's shirt. Pale blue, the size of a child. And stitched into the tag, barely legible from the grime, was a name. Emma. The moment Lena stepped into the cabin, the air shifted. It was colder than outside, but not from weather. Something else made her skin crawl. The smell hit first, mildew, rot, and something faintly sweet, like decaying fruit. Her flashlight beam danced across the warped floorboards, catching the edges of scattered debris. Reyes stayed behind to secure Bear, radioing for backup. Lena had barely waited. Her feet moved on their own, drawn by a terrible gravity. The cabin's walls were lined with shelves, and on those shelves sat objects that didn't belong in the wilderness. A plastic tea set, a deflated soccer ball, 3 cracked porcelain dolls with smeared faces and lifeless glass eyes, a child's hairbrush with strands of golden hair still twisted in its bristles, trinkets, toys, keepsakes, like trophies. She moved deeper, stepping over a broken rocking horse. In the corner sat a child-sized mattress, barely more than a foam slab. A faded blanket lay crumpled at the foot, and beside it, an untouched apple and a half-empty water bottle. Lena froze. The apple was still red, fresh, no mold, no bite marks. Someone had been here, recently. Her flashlight caught drawings taped to the far wall, papers yellowed with damp, their edges curling. Crayon sketches of a little girl, sometimes alone, sometimes holding hands with a dog. But in many of them, looming shapes hovered behind her. Tall figures without faces, scribbled in black. Lena stepped closer, breath held. She recognized one drawing instantly. It was Chloe. Her name was scrawled at the bottom in block letters, backwards E and all. Next to it was another. This one was different. A girl with short dark hair, green shirt, big eyes. Lena's fingers went cold. The name underneath, written in shaky red crayon, Emma. A rustle echoed from the back room. Lena's flashlight snapped toward the sound, but nothing moved. Just shadows, stretching long across the floorboards. She backed away slowly, heart hammering, and pulled out her phone. "We're not alone," she whispered to Reyes through the line. "There's a second child." She could still smell the apple, still feel the heat that lingered in the room. Whoever had brought that food was probably still nearby. The sound of tires crunching gravel sent a bolt of ice down Lena's spine. She froze mid-step, still inside the cabin. Bear pressed close to her leg. Reyes stood by the door, his gun drawn, his jaw tight. The rumble stopped just outside. Someone was here. Reyes motioned silently for Lena to get low, then peek through the slats of the warped wooden window. A white pickup truck. Familiar, dented bumper, no plates. And stepping out of the driver's seat, moving with the slow confidence of someone who thought he was still alone. "Mr. Dalton." He glanced around once, then opened the back of the truck. In his hands was a small canvas bag. Lena couldn't see what was inside, but the way he handled it, casual, like routine, made her stomach churn. Reyes muttered, "Son of a..." But then a floorboard creaked beneath Lena's boot. Dalton's head snapped toward the cabin. For a split second, he stared at the door. Then, like a switch had been flipped, he dropped the bag, turned, and bolted for the trees. Reyes didn't hesitate. He shoved open the door. "Police! Don't move!" But Dalton was already sprinting, crashing through the underbrush, crashing into shadows. Reyes took off after him, gun drawn, shouting warnings that tore through the still forest air. Lena ran to the doorway, heart slamming, Bear growling low beside her. She caught a glimpse of Dalton weaving through the trees, his limbs wild, desperate. Not graceful, panicked. Reyes gained on him fast. Then, crack, a branch snapped, and Dalton tripped hard, slamming shoulder first into the ground. He scrambled to rise, but Reyes was on him in seconds, forcing him down, cuffing his wrists with practiced precision. "I didn't do anything," Dalton gasped, face pressed into the leaves. "I was just out here for supplies." "In the middle of nowhere," Reyes growled. "With no license plate, after breaking into a woman's home and stealing her dog?" Dalton went pale. He hadn't realized they'd connected the dots. Lena approached slowly, her flashlight trembling in her grip. Bear stayed close, tail stiff, teeth bared. Dalton looked up, and when he saw Bear, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Fear. He knew the dog, just as Bear had known him. Reyes yanked him to his feet. "You're done running." And for the first time since Chloe vanished, the case wasn't cold anymore. It was burning hot, and they had the man who lit the match. The interrogation room was dim and cold, lit by a single flickering bulb that buzzed like an angry insect. Dalton sat hunched over the steel table, sweat beading at his temples despite the chill. His jacket had been taken. His fingers drummed anxiously, restrained by cuffs. His mouth was a hard, bitter line. Across from him, Detective Reyes sat still, a folder unopened before him. Lena watched from behind the two-way mirror, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Bear lay at her feet in the observation room, his head on his paws, unmoving but wide awake. Reyes didn't ask a question. Not at first. He just stared. Let the silence press down like weight on Dalton's shoulders. Finally, Dalton broke. "This is a mistake," he muttered. "You don't have anything real. Just some girl's backpack, a dog, and a bunch of forest junk." Reyes opened the folder. Slowly, deliberately. He laid out the photo of Chloe, found in the shallow grave. Then a Ziploc bag with the fabric bearing Emma's name. Then a printout of the microchip scan from Bear, former K9 unit, reassigned from a rescue tied to a raid 3 years ago. He tapped a finger on the page. "You remember that house, don't you? The one with the soundproof basement and the locked freezer in the garage. Bear was there. He was trained to track scent, and he picked you out the second he saw you." Dalton's face twitched. Reyes leaned in, voice low and sharp. "We have DNA. We have physical evidence. But what we really have is a dog who never forgot you. And now a witness who saw you at that cabin. You can either talk now, or talk when the feds bury you under a federal trafficking case." Dalton looked down. His hands shook. The silence stretched long again, until it snapped. "They're gone now," he whispered. "All of them. The others moved on after the last girl, Emma. Said she was too noisy, too much trouble. We rotated locations, dumped old sites like that campground before they drew attention." "And Chloe?" Reyes asked. Dalton swallowed hard. "She was the first, the youngest. She lasted the longest. The dog. He was with her, every day. Slept in her room. That was their mistake, bringing in a K9. He was too smart." He laughed bitterly. "And they thought he was broken." Lena felt her knees weaken, her hand falling to Bear's head. He didn't move, but his breathing had changed. Slower, heavier. Like he remembered everything. Reyes's voice was ice. "Where is Emma?" Dalton's lips parted. "I don't know," he said. "But someone does, and they'll do worse than I ever did if they think you're close." Reyes stood abruptly. "We're already close," he said. Dalton flinched as the door slammed shut behind the detective. In the other room, Lena crouched beside Bear, whispering into his fur. "We're going to find her, just like we found Chloe." And Bear, silent and watchful, pressed into her, steady as stone. Because the hunt wasn't over yet. The morning sun cast long, golden beams across the trees as the search team combed the perimeter of the abandoned campground. Lena stood beside Detective Reyes, heart pounding with every crunch of boots through underbrush. Bear was off-leash now, his nose low to the ground, body moving with sharp, deliberate focus. Dalton's confession had narrowed the area, a second location used when the first got too hot. According to him, it was close enough to run, but far enough to hide. Bear stopped suddenly. His head snapped toward a dense patch of trees behind a rusted storage building. His ears stood erect. Then he took off. "Bear," Lena called, but he was already gone, tearing through the brush like a bullet with purpose. Reyes gave a sharp whistle to the nearby agents. "This way." Lena chased after Bear, branches snapping against her arms and legs. She could hear him barking now, loud, insistent, rapid. Not aggressive. Urgent. They broke through a clearing, and there it was. A shed. Small, weathered, almost camouflaged by time and moss. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges, and from inside came a faint, terrified whimper. Bear stood outside, barking wildly, paws scratching at the base of the door. He circled once, nose pressed to the crack near the bottom, then barked again, louder, more frantic. Reyes surged forward and yanked the door open. A gasp escaped Lena's throat. Huddled in the corner was a girl, no older than 8, dressed in a dirty, oversized sweatshirt, her legs curled to her chest. Her eyes were wide and sunken with exhaustion, but they flicked toward the light like she recognized salvation when she saw it. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. But when Bear stepped inside and gently nosed her knee, she reached for him. Reyes knelt beside her, voice gentle. "Emma?" The girl gave the faintest nod. Lena dropped to her knees, tears slipping down her face before she realized they'd started. Emma was alive, terrified, trembling, and silent, but alive. Bear lay beside her now, his body curved protectively around hers, tail thumping gently, a low whine humming in his throat. Emma's small fingers clutched his fur like a lifeline. Reyes called it in. Medics were dispatched. The agents moved quickly, clearing the area and checking for signs of anyone else nearby. But for now, they had her. They had Emma. And Bear, once a forgotten dog from a forgotten case, had led them to her. As the team helped Emma into the ambulance, Lena leaned down beside Bear and whispered through a choked breath, "You did it." He looked up at her, calm and steady, then rested his head against her hand. Because for him, it had never been about the chase. It had always been about the rescue. The air was warmer now, touched with spring. The same trail that once felt heavy with secrets was quiet in a different way, as if the trees themselves had exhaled. Lena walked slowly, her boots crunching over gravel, Bear padding beside her with an ease she hadn't seen in months. His gait was relaxed, his ears perked, but not tense. He stopped occasionally to sniff patches of grass, nose twitching, tail wagging with soft curiosity instead of caution. It had been 3 weeks since they'd found Emma. 3 weeks since Dalton's arrest, since the ring had been exposed. Emma was with a care team now, recovering slowly. She still hadn't spoken, but she smiled when she saw Bear during his visits. Quiet, knowing smiles that said more than words ever could. Chloe's family had held a small memorial in the clearing where Bear found her things. Lena had gone. So had Reyes. So had Bear. He'd sat perfectly still through the whole thing, his eyes watching the trees, like he understood what was being honored. Now, as they walked their old route, Lena found herself glancing toward the edge of the woods again. The same place Bear had once tugged her leash and changed everything. He paused there, just like he used to. But this time there was no growl, no whine, just a slow wag of his tail and a look over his shoulder as if to say, "See? We did it." Lena smiled, stepping closer. She ran a hand over his fur, feeling the old scar along his side, the one that had once marked him as broken. But he hadn't been. He'd been waiting, remembering, leading. "You okay?" she whispered. He leaned gently into her, pressing his weight into her legs, then trotted forward down the trail, peaceful, content, whole. Lena followed, her heart lighter than it had been in a long, long time. Because justice had come, because the ghosts had been heard, and because Bear had led them all home.